SCP innovation and small and medium enterprises. That's where I want to focus my brief presentation. As I said, sustainable consumption and production for me is at the basics of all those strategies that we have been developing for the last 30 years. Would it be on sustainable development, circular economy, green economy, and name them low carbon economy? If you look at them from in detail, you will see from the ones prepared 30 years ago to the ones prepared nowadays, between 80 and 90% of the chapters and the words are almost the same. We're talking about the same thing simply because we have not been able to implement properly the sustainable development strategy. Because if we had them at that time, we don't need a green economy strategy because it would have embedded greening the supply chain. So they are all very common, but they were prepared in a differentiated manner. And where we failed is what I call the missing link, which is the sustainable consumption and production. How can we effectively deliver those strategies without properly looking at our consumption patterns and production process? And if we failed in doing that, because even though we have planned those strategies over 20, 30 years, we did not look properly for what we call a transition period. A transition period need to factor in, we need to think ahead properly. And for that, we need to have steps and stages in implementing those strategies, which unfortunately with a new government or a new UN agencies, we do the things again 4 or 5 years ago, and we rename them differently, and we forget of what the step that has been done. So this transition period that need to be factored in with all the resources is not giving due attention. And this influences properly the speed and the transition. Creation of knowledge, because any new strategy, the period changes. Necessity for innovation, but innovation needs some kind of incentives. Innovation that goes throughout the design of the products to the behavior of the consumer. And of course, looking at the business model that are absolutely essential in order to see how we can move further in order to deliver properly this. So we are here to talk about the importance of eco-innovation. But innovation, eco-innovation is very interesting per se and is an absolute necessity. But it has to be understood not just as an edge innovation. It has to be systemic. If it doesn't encompass the whole supply chain for greening it, if it doesn't look at the system with all its components and the life cycle, innovation will be at the edge. We have done something, but it will not have the impact we expect because we did not consider the whole system and the supply chain. And also, when we consider the system, we will look at the different stakeholders. When I talk about stakeholders, old people like me, young people like you, most of you are connected, large companies, but also, if not mainly, micro and small and medium enterprises, because at that level, innovation is different than what is at level of big companies. And it is at that level where we deliver on the ground and we can make a change. Now, we went on eco-innovation in the beginning, mainly by looking at caring about scarcity of resources. Even though we have plenty of resources, but depending where you are, we started with that, oh, we might not get enough resources, so let us innovate to see how to move further. Then we understand much more the need for efficiency, looking at the proper business case by improving resource efficiency. At the end of the day, you save resources and you save money for yourself, and you can make good business out of that. And innovation, the beauty of innovation, can enable a higher resource efficiency, which means save more resources and make more benefits and be the leader in a market when you move on those issues. The problem is if you don't consider proper a system approach, you have an issue of priority. Which sector are you going to focus on in order to get the right multiplier effect? And this brings you again to the transition period in order to enable a transition with the different stakeholders and see how you can move further. Now, when it comes to the priorities, there are plenty of issues ahead of us. Are we going to focus on lifestyles, as Mushtaq referred to in the beginning? Or within lifestyles, are we focusing on the behavioral change? Because lifestyle is much larger. Or should we just go through plastics and waste or green building and so on? The interest here is that take any one of those sectors or those focus areas, they just have to be considered as an entry point to the system. So from any of those elements that you see here around the circle, each one of them could be a very good entry point depending on the context where you are, but they have to bring you to the others. Meaning, if you work on green public procurement, you have to see how this influences the green building, how this looks at the waste and cities, how this can influence the resilient cities. If you look at waste and plastics, you touch with your lifestyle and behavioral change. It's go to the tourism sector, how the procurement help you in handling this issue, how a city is better managing and so on. So it's extremely important that you look at any priority sector as an entry point to the system. Now, an important element that we have today is COVID. But what is COVID? What is this pandemic that we have other than just an issue of our unsustainable lifestyle? We created it by our unsustainable consumption production patterns. So COVID is not over. Others are coming if we don't learn from that and change our habits and get to the system properly. But the big problem is when we talk about all these issues, sustainability, SCP, and so on, we tend to neglect what are, from my perspective, the two most important stakeholders, the municipalities and the small and medium enterprises. Why they are out of scope? Because there are too many and they are too small. So we prefer dealing with big companies and with the government, while at the end of the day, the ones who make the change are the municipalities. That's where the consumption patterns happen. And the small and medium enterprises, because that's where the process of production happens to feed in the big companies. But they are not so much of big interest to the companies. Even in the UN system, we give them 1 hour in the morning to have in the MEJ group some consultation, but they don't have any decision power. So for me, these are what I call the unseen champions, where you get the startups, where we get the right innovation, where the youth have a role to play, where the young entrepreneurs have an extremely important to play in order to deliver this change. So it's no longer just looking at it top down, which is the current system, but look at it bottom up. The youth with their ideas go up to the system, the micro and small enterprises go up to the system. Very briefly, what we're doing in Switch Asia. 3 components. Mushtaq is in the regional policy advocacy component. I'm in the SCP facility. And we have a series of grant projects which represent most of the funding, or more than 90% of the funding of Switch Asia. We have had almost 130 projects. 35 are ongoing. And all of them, or let us say most of them, work on innovation. They come with new ideas, and we try to pilot them at the local level. And hopefully for some of them, we have been able to take them up. So I'm not going to go into the details here. Selected just 4 clusters. There are much more than that. And you see where those grant projects are focusing on and what can be learned from there in order to scale up and scale up the innovation. Building the capacity of micro, small, and medium enterprises, how to work with the market, how to innovate, how to work on resource efficiency, how to work on innovation. Sometimes they just need a small push to move further. When you look in the textile sector, so much is happening now, talk, greenwashing, but a lot can be done if you look at the energy practices in the manufacturing sector. If you look at the technical and financial services to be provided to those textile industries, and of course the labeling system. Same applies to the waste management and plastic reduction and sustainable housing. So many opportunities there, where I highlighted here a few of the key words on which we are working that could be driving an innovation, that could be ideas for startups, for which this Switch Asia program provided a context, a pilot, a demonstration that others can take over. But of course, these projects also learn from what other startups have been doing in certain countries to effectively develop this project, which is funded by the EU. Now, let me give you a couple of last 2 slides. An idea of this issue on plastic, on how we approach the issue. You probably have seen a movie on that. I call it the bad, the ugly, and the good. If you go around, you have it in Bangkok, and in many cities in Asia, happening a lot in India. We want to ban plastic. We want to ban single-use plastic. Sorry, this is not a good idea at all, because this is politics. This is greenwashing. In plastic, there are good things. Plastics made a revolution. We cannot live without plastic. But what plastic are we talking about? There are bad plastic. Yes, these ones, let us get rid of them. Let us ban them. But what are we? Let us be clear on what we are talking about. There are ugly ones, the ones that are polluting. Let us better manage them. Let us make sure that they don't go to the sea. Let us make good business out of that. Let us change the behavior of the people. And anything that we are doing on innovation and startup need to ask those questions. What is good that we need to maintain and scale up? What is ugly that we need to improve? And what is bad, how in order to get rid of it? So all of us, we definitely we want changes. No one will tell you, I don't want changes, but it stops there. When it comes to make the change, how you drive the change, the entry points are different, how we handle it is different, and this is the most challenging, how to make the people more responsible and to be the change. And definitely, the ones who can be the capital change are the youth and the small entrepreneurs. That are the ones who can really lead us and to move further. So it's absolutely essential when switching to sustainable consumption production, we look at the enabling process that will take us to create properly an impact. Thank you very much. Let us switch to